in a 64 Ford Aventura that my boss lets me drive. Look at all the college girls running around. It makes me feel so alive. That corner there is where I used to score. Demerol and fentanyl and so much more. Cruising down a memory lane of things I'd rather forget. Like my mom getting beat to a bloody pulp. Like the drugs and the booze could never get enough. Like the man that I accidentally killed by stuffing a rag into his mouth, unaware of his 98% black nasal passages. Cruising in a 64 Ford Aventura that my boss lets me drive. Driving past the film cartridge distributor. Hey, let's go check out inside. A lot of strange wheelchair tracks on the floor. Hey, there's a guy that's been shot in the face and a broom shoved from esophagus to anus, it seems. I Hate Infinite Jest, episode 17. Our guest this week from the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast, Josh Kaluba. Josh was calling in from the other side of the pond, previously in London, now in Newcastle, it seems. Go check out their podcast. We had a great talk today. There's nothing I can really add to it, and also I've budgeted way too much of my time, and I wasted it on that song, so I hope you appreciate it, you motherfuckers. By the way, we hit 6,000 downloads this week. Thank you, guys. This is by far one of the most successful projects I've ever worked on. I don't know how to feel about any of that. I'm very conflicted. I mean, maybe I just need to hit 10,000. Maybe I'll feel something. I don't know. That would be up to you guys. I mean, I wouldn't want to ask something like that, like, adding another. You already did all the work, but I mean, if you could just duplicate 60% of that and get me to 10,000, I mean, that might feel good for me. Anyway, Josh Kaluba, episode 17, pages 470 to 503. Check it out. Check out the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast, episode 17, Josh Kaluba. I Hate Infinite Jest, episode 17, a prime number episode, which means it's probably good? I don't know. Our guest this week, coming all the way from over the Atlantic, Josh Kaluba, one of the hosts of the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast. Did I get that right, Josh?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, I'm the best. Yeah, thank you for being on here, man. I'm really appreciating it. Before we get too into it, tell us who you are, where we can find you, whatever you need to promote.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Josh. I'm from London. I'm currently living in Newcastle though, because I study here. And so I'll just plug my podcast real quick. But I'm really excited to talk about the book, so I'll be super quick. The Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast is essentially a podcast I do with my friend. The kind of aim of it started off just being a fun thing, and then with each just where we talk about music and films, but each discussion we realize we're bringing so much of our like personal lives into it that it's kind of become more of a podcast about approaching kind of pop culture topics from backgrounds that aren't usually talked about in like the podcast world, or like that voices we don't usually hear from. So obviously I'm black. I guess it's not obvious to the listener, maybe from the name.
I'm looking at a video. I'm so embarrassed. I did not notice.
Yeah. My podcast co-host is trans. She's also Irish and Jewish, so it's the more minority points. And we just try to give unique perspective to things, or kind of talk from a personal space. Some episodes that doesn't even come up, but that's kind of the premise of the podcast. So check it out if you're interested. You find us at many streaming services. I'm sure. Hopefully, Jesse will put some links down in the podcast description. That's my deal. That's my deal.
It's I definitely need to check the podcast out, because I think I mentioned on one of the episodes how in a talk with cousin Frank from episode 6, he was talking about how he was really trying to read books that were not written by white men, really try to get out of his perspective. I'm like, all right, you know what? I want to do that too. And then as soon as I went to buy more books, like, ooh, Brendan Behan, Drunken Irishman. Okay, like just completely went right now. I don't know where to begin, unfortunately.
I was talking about this with my flatmate as well, because even even I fall into that trap because another part of that is a lot of the huge books that take up like a year of your life
Mhm.
are normally written by white dudes, like your James Joyce's, your Thomas Pynchon's, and they're so like exciting to get into, and you just want to like spend all your time in there. And then, but then you don't want to become that guy who only reads that type of literature, and to everyone else you seem like an arsehole, I guess.
Right. I mean, I feel like my weakness is like if somebody I already respect and I'm a fan of, like I feel like that's how I find all my books. Somebody I already respect and who I'm a fan of will be like, this is the greatest book ever. Go read it. So it's like, well, I mean, if those other books were so good, surely they'd find their way to me. Aside from the fact, but no, because I can't find the people who are talking about those books to begin with. It's just outside of my realm. Oh man. As a white guy, I do kind of miss when I could just be lazy and like, yeah, you know, Kenny Rogers, best rock star ever. I don't need to know any more than that. But no, we have to work on ourselves these days, all of humanity. So how exactly did you first come up? What is your literary background? How did you come upon David Foster Wallace and Infinite Jest overall?
Yeah. So I think what's exciting about this for me is that I'm definitely the youngest guest who's been on your show. I'm 20 years old. So I feel like I am.
You weren't upfront with me. It canceled now. No.
I feel like I'm the illusory David Foster Wallace fan you keep hinting at. You know, the 18-year-old who discovers the book and their mind is blown and it forms their personality. I feel like I started off as that kid. Like I became interested in this when I was like 17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it was just sold to me as this like amazing literary experience that you can get lost in, and you have to read it twice, and it's got all these secrets. And I think the main thing that really sold it to me is I was told it was very much about loneliness. And I think as a teenager, loneliness is the thing you kind of obsess over. You know, you listen to Elliott Smith and you read your Nietzsche, and you know, you get real moody. So I really thought it would be that book. And then over the past 2 years, I've been reading it on and off. And I think I've grown a little bit as a person and had this whole like disillusionment period where I was like, wow, yeah, maybe David Foster Wallace is a bit of a piece of shit, and you know, maybe we shouldn't glorify like this white guy killing himself. Like maybe this is a really weird culture that's grown around this. Mm-hmm. And then now I'm at a point where this summer I decided, okay, I need to finish this book like as soon as possible. I need to move on in my life. Mm-hmm. And I'm more and more annoyed with the book. I think there was a lot of points. And listening to the podcast was like cathartic at first. So I was like, I could just listen to someone be annoyed about the book as I work through it. And then you started liking it. And I was like, oh, great. Now I have to like, now I feel like I'm missing something. And parts of it that's frustrating for me is I can acknowledge parts that are good. I just feel like I'm being held hostage. I just want to go and read other things.
Yes.
But I know if I stop reading, I might never pick it up again. And I don't want to become another person who didn't finish Infinite Jest. So that's where I'm at with the book.
Okay. So wait, so you still haven't finished it yet, or you have finished it at this point?
No, I'm currently at like page 600. So
okay.
I'm a bit further away right now, but yeah, I haven't finished it yet.
All right, that's good. You're on the journey with us. So many people like, don't worry, I've heard alternately, it'll all make sense in the end. Also, there's not really an ending. That's why you got to read it a second time, which just does not sound like anything I want to do. I finally have a good enough system set up where I tend to do my reading for the week. Like I have it finished by like Tuesday, and then I can read other things, and it's beautiful. But I'm just kind of wanting to be done.
Yeah.
If it were not for the podcast format and wanting to stay on schedule, I probably would have taken a month off from the book by now. And that's me saying, like, having liked the last few chapters, it's just you're so far in and there's still so far to go, you know?
I think what infuriates me is it's not like, you know, it's not like you're into Dostoevsky, right? I haven't read Dostoevsky yet, but the way it's sold to me is like, you know, you finish it and it all comes together and it's really satisfying. And then, you know, implied there is you can move on. Whereas the way Infinite Jest is sold, it's like you finish it and you have no idea what happened and you got to read it again.
Yeah.
That infuriates me. The idea that all that's waiting for me at the end of this is reading it again.
Now, I feel like Dostoevsky is really like the idealization of what people think of when they think of like, you know, I want to read a big challenging book. Like you read the whole thing and you learn things and like, oh, nobody's worded it like that. And then it's over and you just go look out the window for about 20 minutes a day and just ponder everything you've absorbed. Whereas this, you're like, yeah, I read a sentence and like, fuck this. I don't want this. No. But then I remember I have this podcast to do. So
yeah. And I don't know. I can't remember who said this, but I remember someone on the pod said the book kind of has its own immune system. It's almost impossible to criticize it. And I keep developing this sort of Stockholm syndrome, right, where the more bored I get, the more I have to intellectualize the boredom to justify the time that I'm spending. You know, I'm going to be dead maybe in 80 years. I'm spending a significant chunk of time reading this book. So I'm trying to justify it, and I'm like, well, I'm meant to feel bored, and you know, that's his whole thing. And my most recent theory is reading this is what I guess it feels like to go sober. I've never like had an addiction so bad that I have to become sober. Maybe I'm too young for these addictions to be apparent yet, but maybe this is what it's like to get up every day and be like, I have to sit down and not do drugs and be bored. Maybe that's what it's like to read this.
See, all right, my experience is limited. I've been whatever. I'll be honest on the podcast. A little bit. I drink a bit, not even too much, too often. But lately, I've been trying to cut it in half. I've been trying to do like 3 to 4 sober days a week, and I can tell you, it is just the boredom more than anything else. Because I have just set myself on a clock where like, okay, it's 10:30. I'm going to take my brain on a little bit of a, you know, chemical merry-go-round for a bit. And then that'll be, you know, I'll tucker myself out before bed. And now, you know, you don't really have that. So it's well, I'm smoking weed, but so I guess, never mind. That entire analogy falls apart when it's like, yeah, sobriety's terrible. So I do this other drug, but it's not the same. Yeah. But no, there is a boredom aspect of it. And it's funny that, if you look at it from an addiction component, speaking personally, the only part of the book that's really captivating to me is the stuff with Don Gately. So I guess it is kind of interesting to look at that, like the story of the addict is the only thing that's really keeping me returning to this book.
And I honestly feel like in the past like bit of the book, the middle of the chunk of the book, I feel like that's what Foster Wallace is most interested in, because I feel like there was actually loads of really interesting stuff happening in the tennis academy like really early on in the book. I was really enjoying that, and then in the middle it's really just the Ennett House stuff that's captivating, and you don't even really get huge chunks of tennis academy stuff since like the since the Eschaton game. I don't remember really big moments happening, so I feel like maybe Foster Wallace himself is more interested in Gately's story.
Yeah, well, all right, here's the other way I would put it, is that out of all the characters so far, the only ones I really care about is probably Gately. This is where, and maybe you can enlighten me on this, again, being younger and really realizing like the boring aspect of it. A lot of people really identify with Hal. I feel nothing for Hal. As a matter of fact, I think I feel negatively about him. Like, oh, it's you know, oh, I didn't react the way I thought I would. I need to go and ponder this. Does this make me a bad person? Go fuck yourself. I don't care. But I know a lot of people. What is your take so far on like Hal? Who are you identifying with? Who are you caring about as characters?
So Hal was really sold to me at the beginning because I had a friend who like deals with kind of, you know, mental health stuff, and they feel like the first 20 pages of how like trying to communicate and have to be understood and then be looked upon as a freak pretty much. They thought that was a really great encapsulation of like what it's like to be sort of unable to communicate properly to people and always seem like a freak. So it started off really strong. But yeah, I don't even think how he's kind of a non-entity for the past few hundred pages. Like he feels like an audience plugin. Like he is the character we see the world through. And he doesn't really do anything. We just get to see things through his eyes. Like it's in those sections, it's Pamela, so I'm always excited to spend more time with. Because he's all, and any scene of him is interesting.
Yeah, he's a nice little. He's a nice little agent of chaos. I like Pemulus, but again, it's I know it's like an ensemble cast, but like we're meeting these people, and then we just don't. I don't think we've seen Pemulus since Eschaton, and if I remember correctly, I don't think he was doing so much in like the ramp up before Eschaton either.
but
Yeah.
I don't know. All right.
The ensemble really worked best for me when Joel Van Dyne and Ken O'Dirty and all the characters we'd met already started arriving at Ennet House. And I feel like I so completely get those people. They feel so vivid to me. So I really feel the ensemble feeling in the Ennet House sections. But in the Tennis Academy, like, I keep forgetting the students' personalities. Lots of them have very thin characters.
There's Axelrod and Postal Weight, and it's like I remember this name, and that's it. Yeah. Who was the giant girl in Eschaton? It wasn't Millicent Kent. It was.
Oh God, I don't remember. I'm sorry.
I don't remember. I've lost so much of this. Okay, so all right, I guess we're good to get into the notes. You and I talked before this, and I have stated that it's been a little frustrating to me, given that the show is called I Hate Infinite Jest, and I've been liking it recently, but I found quite a bit in this week's section that I really did not like. We're doing 470-503. I'm going to read off my notes and interrupt anytime you have something to interject, and I'll obviously take pauses. 470, we have Moraith and Steepley, May 1st, still outside of Tucson. Steepley brings up a Canadian neuroscientist who developed a method of implanting hair-thin electrodes to stimulate parts of the brain and prevent seizures. Moraith notes his father had a pacemaker using similar hair-thin electrodes. Steepley says the brain stimulus gave intense feelings of pleasure, enough so that experimenters split off, half working to continue on animals and the seizure issues, and the rest pursuing it for its pleasure aspects. In experiments, the rats would press a lever for the electrode stimulation over and over, ignoring food and female rats and heat until they died of dehydration and fatigue. So obviously we have a correlation to the entertainment here. Even when the electrodes were removed and the lever removed, the animal would maddeningly press on anything, hoping for stimulation. The doctor, whose name was Elder or Older, it's not clear in the text, wanted to experiment on humans, but wasn't certain where to get them. A janitor with security clearance in Manitoba leaked the studies, and suddenly there was a flood of volunteers outside the lab doors, despite knowing about the rat deaths. Psychologists found them to be upsettingly normal, just looking for a thrill. Said to be the condensed elixir of orgasm and religious enlightenment and ecstatic drugs and a cackling fire on a winter night, all in one electrode-induced feeling. I do like that concept right there, where it's not like, no, it's not just a drug high. It's, watching your son graduate and, itching just the right spot.
Yeah, this is another bit that I kind of, there's lots of parts in this book that I can't tell how, to me, they feel a bit sophomoric, like a bit simple. And I don't know if there's more to it or if I'm being obnoxious, but like, it is just a very simple, like, Brave New World, would you put yourself in the happy pod argument that they're having. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's happened a lot in the book, and it's explored way more interestingly with the Gately's struggle with this newfound boredom and routine. And that is a really interesting way of exploring this. But this, I don't know, it just feels a bit obvious on the nose. Like,
yeah, the only thing that's really come out of the whole Moraith and Steepley conversations is when Oren starts talking about, like, yeah, this giant woman is interviewing me. It's like, and even that's not, it's not like there's any substance there. That's just like, I know who that is. And that's it. It hasn't really added anything. And we know there's some stuff in the background where Steepley's been assigned to follow Oren around to find something out. So there might be something a bit more nefarious hanging in there at the end. But really, I haven't gotten anything like, and of course, they have that conversation there. And then my next note is, and then pretty much after talking about this whole thing, and then Steepley adds, by free choice, of course, meaning they're still having the same argument they were having before with Moraith saying Americans were just out for pleasure and had no, like, group national identity or care. With Steepley, like, well, these were Canadians, and they were, it's very ham-fisted and on the nose.
Yeah, I really like Steepley as a presence. I think he's a very, like, well-realized character, but it is kind of, he is symbolizing America basically justifying itself to a country that wants to destroy it, right? It reminds you a bit of, like, you ever read Watchmen?
Yes.
Right, yeah, it reminds you of the whole thing of having to convince Dr. Manhattan that humanity is worth saving. I feel like maybe the point of these sections is Steepley trying to convince a Canadian that America is worth saving.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like Moraith hasn't been fleshed out enough that, like, it doesn't. It doesn't. It's not like Dr. Manhattan where he has a little bit of connection to these people. Like Moraith doesn't seem to. There's no soft spot to prod on that. He's just like, yeah, now you're all American pigs, and I do a French accent, but I'm not. Yeah, me and my girlfriend have actually been talking this week about maybe moving to Montreal. So I think this book might have dug into me a little bit.
Join the AFR.
That's right. Yeah, go hop in front of a train. So when the U.S. and the Canadians together saw the horrible possibilities of these electrodes as recreational pleasure, leading to calamity, loss of human capital, etc., both governments defunded the program and agreed to make it a pure military weapon operation, literally stormed the facilities and killed the test animals. This all happened in the 70s. Steeply discusses all this as an analogy to the entertainment, which seems to have achieved the same pleasure center without the use of electrodes. And, we're obviously, people call this book very prescient. So I think the connection we would have most nowadays is like cell phones, where it does annoy me a little bit when you like roll over in the morning, look at the phone, and then you're eventually like, I've been laying in bed in an hour and I've added nothing to my life nor begun my life for the day.
Well, I don't know what it was like in the 90s, but I feel like this has been going on since kind of like the 60s, 70s, like this kind of, like how in the early 20th century there was no really such thing as a teenager. Like you kind of at some point you just become an adult, and it's very like work focused. It is around the 60s where teen culture starts being a thing, like doing stuff just for fun, not being obsessed with careers. And it seems like at a certain point, as careers become less and less important, or it's rebellious to like understand that the corporate bullshit 90s ethos, right? This question of what else is there then, like fun, pleasure, and then eventually that becomes empty. So I think it's a very timely question for the past few decades. I wouldn't say it's prescient, but I get that it's only ramped up since it started.
Yeah, it's kind of hard not to be very nihilistic of it, just because you're like, I want to get more out of life than working for a corner office and a white picket fence. Like, oh well, what do you want? Like, I want to play my PlayStation for 8 hours a day. It's like, oh well, okay, I'm glad you're principled about something, and it is one of those just like, how free can you possibly be? It's like, well, I want to do what I want to do. Like, yeah, but that thing has been like focus grouped and studied a million times over to make sure you want nothing but that. So how free is it?
Yeah, which is, again, it's way more interesting to talk about the book sometimes than it is to read it, because I do think that idea of like, you're free to do whatever you want, you're free to choose, but my brain is like a dumb reptilian thing that just wants to feel good all the time. So that's how we end up with Ennett House, right? People addicted to TV, drugs. It's very hard to pick the good thing and differentiate that from just what my brain tells me I want all the time.
The great wording I read on it once that was all about the notion of free will is you can do what you want, but you can't want what you want. Like, you're wired a specific way and there's nothing you can really do about it. Even if you were like, never touch a drug, if you're wired for addiction, like, it's just, you can never touch a drug, but it's still something you're going to have to work against. So,
yeah.
All right. Next section here. Gately has been asked to go to the store after 2 new female residents are refusing to eat his hot dogs, one of whom is Joelle. Gately already senses something fishy, that this is the kind of special caseness that AA is specifically supposed to weed out of a person. That Pat M is already showing favoritism to Joelle VD for some reason, with Pat asking Gately to find some special soda water she likes. Gately admits he's taking longer than necessary on these trips, that he's getting kicks out of driving recklessly in Pat's car. The cops and Boston residents tend to drive like maniacs as well, so he's not too worried getting busted for it. Also, driving around his old haunts in a car that isn't his makes him feel a little bit like he's back in the old days, thieving and being reckless. More discussion of how Gately's head is square and indestructible, his strange Prince Valiant bangs, looking like someone tossed the remnant of a carpet sample on his head. Gately
Yeah, I really loved the bit about how his friends would just routinely break things against his head and see how far they could go. Um, One of your previous guests said this book's basically a big cartoon, and that really drives home how it is so cartoonish and comic booky.
Oh yeah, I find this is a trouble I have with like a lot of like books that are supposed to be like funny in literature, and I know people have said some people find this book hysterical. There's some witticisms in there, but I feel like the more a book is trying to be funny, the harder it is to really read the tone and like see the world as it's supposed to be. But yeah, stuff like that. His square indestructible head does kind of lend it more towards the cartoonish side, which I guess everything just you don't care as much that it doesn't make sense when it's got that kind of like otherworldly feel anyway. Gately drives recklessly through Boston U campus looking at women. He hasn't had sex in 2 years, physically incapable at one point due to Demerol abuse. AA encourages people to do the first year of sobriety sexless, but it does tend to degrade someone's confidence in even speaking to a woman. Great little paragraph here. Quote, Gately's never had sex sober yet, or danced, or held somebody's hand except to say the Our Father in a big circle. He's gone back to having wet dreams at age 29.
Yeah, that was a bit the due to my lack of life experience I didn't get. How does abstaining from sex help you stay sober? Is it normally linked to relapsing, or
it's not so much that it leads to relapse. It's that this is a time when you should be working on yourself, and not to mention if the main problem with addiction is like you're denying yourself something that gave you a lot of pleasure. So it's not really good. It could be very easy to just take that stimulation and put it all into sex, in which case you're not working on yourself. You're just trying to find your stimulation elsewhere.
Yeah, it's about changing your relationship to pleasure.
Exactly. And although it is prominent enough in AA that dating somebody in the program is referred to as the 13th step. So. And also, just putting this note out there, because I always find it funny when I hear it, he's gone back to having wet dreams at age 29. I am about to be a 34-year-old man, never had a wet dream even once. I don't know. I think the world is playing a trick on me.
You think it's a myth? You don't think it exists?
It's a myth. It's a myth, like the moon landing and biodegradable plastic. Yeah.
And the Earth being round.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. Gately has switched to menthol cigarettes. Some people have told him they were worse than regular cigarettes, but after discovering the room he was staying in had to be nuclear waste style, cleaned after decomposing asbestos was found, he figures he has bigger lung worries than menthol cigarettes. Continues driving through strange areas, one being all Portuguese. Note, we're in multiple pages without a paragraph break territory, my least favorite parts of the book.
Another thing I thought is curious, if you don't mind me interrupting you, is Gately like racializes everything. So like he associates the menthol cigarettes of black people. He associates certain areas of the Portuguese. He's like very hyper aware of the racial associations of places, in a way that isn't the most conscientious. And I wonder, like, I don't know, what is the point to that? Is because I thought, is Foster Wallace trying to explain how working class white people view race? In that case, it'll be a bit condescending, seeing as Foster Wallace himself isn't working class. I don't know. How do you feel about those bits? Because I feel like Gately's meant to be like white trash, basically.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I feel about Wallace like writing him this way. If it's Wallace's place, or I don't know. How do you feel about that stuff? How Gately's being written? This entire
I have a lot of conflicting feelings on that. Got to be honest, one of my original aversions to not only the book but the people who tended to love the book is it did tend to be a very like well-read upper middle class kind of person. And myself, I went to a community college. I got an associate's, and I'm the first person in my family to even do that. Like both my parents were high school dropouts, so Gotta be honest though, my dad was a pretty racist guy, so that was. But it was like the unobserved racism. It was just kind of like, yeah, that's just that's just how it is. So
Yeah.
I don't.
I know
think,
it's like my dad was a raging homophobe, so I know what it's like.
right, but so I don't know. I have kind of I'm kind of ambivalent about it. The fact that he's putting like, yeah, he's a white trash guy, and of course but I don't know. I think he is trying to show a little bit that like this is somebody who is trying to better themselves despite being given none of the tools to do that at any point in his life. So I guess kind of by showing, he's kind of showing his defaults and just without having to constantly remind us that like, his mom was being beaten and he started drinking at a young age because of that. I feel like it's just a good way to show like, it's not just the experiences. Like this is what they made this person, and that this is how he literally sees the world. That like that he can use such like horrible language and distinction in his head without any of like the negative feeling behind it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. It's just curious that like I imagine Gately is pretty close to Foster Wallace in terms of like this is how Foster Wallace expressing his experience of drugs is through your main character being a recovering drug addict, right? So it's just curious that you pick like this huge supposedly white trash guy to kind of express that.
Yeah, it is very much strange that for the character that's supposed to be expressing the most autobiographical part of him, he chose somebody who was nothing like him from an entirely different background. Which I don't know. I'm sure I could probably find something somewhere why he went that direction. Okay. He drives past a place called Antitois Entertainment, which is a hangout for another Canadian separatist group, the Antitois. They're considered less terrifying than the FLQ and were protected regionally by the status of the late M. Duplessis. So this I actually saw this kind of cinematically in my head. Like we almost like see Gately driving around all these locales, and then suddenly the camera stops as his car keeps going, and we see pretty much these people were protected. Let me try to phrase this right. So Gately is basically driving past the place that was funded by the man he accidentally killed. So just kind of like passing in the night, not aware of each other. Even the people in there were saying that when Duplessis had been murdered, which was an assassination only ONAN would be stupid enough to believe that the command would believe was a botched burglary incident. So literally, the guy... It's interesting to see what they thought that the separatists believe. Like, oh, they're saying it's a botched burglary incident. Like, obviously it was some kind of assassination. Meanwhile, here comes Don Gately bumbling through exactly how he bumbled into murdering that person in the first place.
Yeah, and I really like what you say about it being so cinematic, because I remember the first time I read this section, I was so pissed off at reading this book, and we've just gone through like 3 pages of just Gately driving around, doing nothing, looking at stores. So my eyes are completely glazed over, and I was just like, okay, yeah, let's get through this. And then suddenly I was with the Antitois, and I was like, wait, how did we get here? Is Gately in the shop? Why we had to go back and like figure out where was that transition point?
I actually had to read ahead a little bit. Like, are we with this Lucian guy for like a paragraph? Do I even need to mention he's here? But obviously, yeah.
Yeah, because the book normally it's really consistent with separating sections, and this is one of the few times where there is like an almost seamless transition into basically a completely different section.
Yes,
and I really like that whole bit of you see it focuses on Gately's exhaust pipe and blowing out waste, and then the waste hits the door of the Antitois, and then day turns into night, and it's really like I was really good. I really like that bit.
So we meet Lucien and Bertrand. Bertrand Antitois. Bertrand is the brains. Lucien somehow never got the hang of French, which is a very strange thing for a French-Canadian person. Okay. The group's terrorist activities are pretty lame, like putting a Quebec flag on an ONAN government building. rejected by the FLQ and mostly restrained before Duplessis' death, but is now frittering away on dumb ideas. Lucian is in charge of labeling bootleg film cartridges. Looks out the door for hours, leaning on a broom he fashioned from a branch into a broom with a pointed weapon end. He has to watch all the cartridges that come in on a small viewer that is malfunctioning, warping all images on the left side of the screen. And, I only think, as I say it now, I do think the rest of this little chunk right here is very cinematic in how, like, we see him, he's just kind of looking out, and then suddenly we start seeing the wheelchair people just kind of mill in. And, yeah, you just have that little bit of like, oh, there's a guy in a wheelchair. There's another guy in a wheelchair. There's a lot of people in wheelchairs on this street.
Like, if we're going to get into the kind of, like, this is the most exciting section of what we're discussing today, I think. And it really felt, like, looking back, it is really well crafted. Like, it keeps talking about the broom and how the broom has been made to be a weapon. It's got like a particularly pointed tip. And I didn't think anything of that. And then reading back, I'm like, oh, he gets killed with the broom at the end. It's a really great
Chekhov's pointy broom.
Chekhov's pointy broom. But also, like, Wallace himself was a huge fan of, like, dumb action films, right? And this felt like one time in the book where he just indulged himself and let himself write, like, fun, readable prose, which is enjoyable. So he can do it. He just chooses not to for hundreds of pages.
See, I'm curious if he saw it, because what happens with the broom, which we'll get to in a minute, it basically gets force-fed down Lucian's mouth and out his asshole, skewering him entirely. I'm very curious. That was famously in a horror movie from the 70s called Cannibal Holocaust, where a tribeswoman is, you don't actually see the act, you see the after effect, but very, haunting image. I wonder if he saw that at any point to come up with this skewering.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like, later on, there's a really obvious Monty Python reference, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's pulling from, like, pop culture films.
Okay. Although I will say I did have one little thing here, which was honestly, like, they talk about this jacked guy in a wheelchair shoving it down his throat, but honestly, all I can think is, like, he's in a wheelchair. How does he have the leverage to, like, hold this guy down and do that at the same time? But that's me being nitpicky.
I do not have the answer to that question. I do like how the AFR are described. They're almost like, it's like spiders are a big thing in the book, right? And the way they're, like, climbing down the walls, it felt very insectoid. It felt very spidery to me.
Yeah.
So it's very cool. I like that the leader is wearing, like, a smiley face mask.
Yeah, and there's been hints to, like, a smiley face motif, but, like, I know a lot of it hasn't been really set in stone what it is, but it's been mentioned a few times of, like, people in masks and a smiley face. And I know that Gately himself, like, his shepherd or whatever that he pictures in his head has, like, a smiley face mask. I forget what he was referred to as, but so anyway, yeah, Lucian runs through, finds his brother dead. He reaches for a pistol, which has become ensnared on a thread in his pants, which, when he yanks the gun away, splits his pants down. So that's a little funny thing, fighting for your life, pants around your ankles. A man in a smiley mask tells Lucian in French, which of course Lucian does not understand, that they have come seeking a certain film cartridge master. And so, yeah, pretty much what we can gauge here is that Lucian, these guys somehow came across either, I don't think it's the master yet. Yeah. I think that gets found another way, but at least a copy of the entertainment. But unfortunately, Lucian does not speak French, and so they can never quite communicate with us. So while the wheelchair assassins tear the place apart looking for the cartridge, they completely skewer him. Very strange thing, though. That little section ends with his soul leaves his body and soars north, sounding a bell clear and nearly maternal, alarmed call to arms in all the world's well-known tongues. Like, just like a sentence or two where we just get into the spiritual aspect.
Yeah, that was a big moment of, see how everyone says when you finish it, you can go back and read it again and see stuff you didn't see. I get the vibe that this sort of magical realism, spiritualism is the stuff that is going to become more apparent after finishing it. Because this is the first point in the book that I'm aware of where something explicitly otherworldly and spiritual like happened.
Right. Like
Which
we've had
implies that there are spirits, I guess, in this world, maybe.
Yeah, we've had a lot of absurdist and like dark absurdist things happen. This is the first one though that is like outside as absurd as it gotten. It was all within like the rules of the known universe day to day, and now we have definitely stepped outside that realm. We'll talk about it more at the very end section with where we go back to 1963. But I think one of my beefs that I have with this book is the constant still reintroducing things far along into the book, particularly where we get here. But we have a little chunk with Marith and Stapley again.
But before we get to that chunk, one thing I want to point out, you said you don't find a lot of this book funny, and for the most part I agree with you. I don't read this and like laugh out loud all the time, but there's one joke in that Antitoire entertainment bit that I really loved is so when Lucien was trying to learn French, they teach him "Vachier putain," and tell him it means how to express your love and devotion to your mother. Of course, it actually translates to "fuck off, whore," I believe. And then in a footnote later on, when they're like interrogating Lucien for the entertainment, it says the only thing Lucien can think to say that they would understand is "Vachier putain," but he realizes that might not be the best phrase to use. That I thought that was a really good joke. Yeah.
Okay. It's listen. There's definitely, like anything in a book this long, there are funny parts. It's just I think it's just been more like witticisms than anything else. Nothing that was really like, oh my god, I'm laughing. It's all been like, okay, that's clever. But
yeah, it's sort of. I think because it's so monotonous. Whenever there's a joke, it jolts you a bit. It's like, oh, something interesting happened. That's funny. But it's not really like a Vonnegut novel or something, which is actively quite humorous.
Okay, so we are back with Marith and Steepley on the same day. Steepley asked Marith if he ever thought of viewing it. Whether they have the master, they still have a read-only copy somewhere. Marith confirms that. All the anti-ONAN cells have at least one read-only. Now, this confuses me here. Read-only copy, I obviously know what that is as far as tech, but I'm curious if a read-only copy has like different effects than viewing the master. They're not entirely clear. It might get cleared up at some point whether the read-only it's the way they're discussing it, there seems to be a very distinct importance about the master as opposed to the read-only, but we don't really have any details as to why.
Yeah, I don't know what read-only is. Is that like a transcript?
I believe read-only is wait, no, I have that wrong. I was thinking like the way you used to have, again, you're younger, when we had like burnable CDs. And I'm pretty sure read-only was like you couldn't add anything to the disc. You could only view what was already on there. Like non-writable technology. But I don't know. I might be wrong on that. I don't know. Looking at it.
How do you feel about this whole holographic theory about the entertainment? Did it do anything for you?
Where like they say it's like the theory. I have the note here. Before JOI got into film, he was also a maker of reflecting panels. And there's a theory that the compulsion to continue to watch has something to do with light density tapping into a neural yearning. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I'm not really sold on it.
Yeah, it seemed because this is written in the 90s, before like Avatar happened and films became obsessed with 3D, and then we all realized 3D was bullshit.
Yeah,
it feels like he's trying to describe a 3D film in its like earliest form as this really exciting thing that will entrance us. But also at the beginning, the entertainment illusions were really exciting and like, oh, where's this going to go? What's the entertainment going to be? But now that I'm kind of realizing we're never fully going to know what the entertainment is, and the more that they reveal about it, the less interesting it becomes. Like when it's revealed that the entertainment might basically be Joel Van Dyne's face, it it felt like, I don't know, a bit disappointing for me because like it's come up a lot in the podcast how Foster Wallace's treatment of women, and he it's always about describing how attractive they are or unattractive they are.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of the entertainment is just like Joel Van Dyne is so beautiful that you just can't you can't stop watching the screen. I don't know. I feel like that. I don't know. I feel like maybe I don't know if I want the entertainment to be different or if I want even less of knowing what it is. I like it as this nebulous thing.
So
but what we have doesn't satisfy me.
So this is my read on it so far. I've actually made the weird connection of almost like a kung fu movie. And here's what I mean by that, is that in every kung fu movie, there is the notion of like, have you seen Kill Bill?
Yeah.
Okay, so the master who teaches Uma Thurman is named Pai Mei. And I don't know, do you know kung fu films particularly well?
No, not really. No.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I wasn't like telling you something you already knew. So in a lot of kung fu films, they all have the same bad guy, and it's all that same character that's in Kill Bill, Pai Mei. And I believe that's somebody from like Chinese culture who would be like a martial arts wizard, more or less. But in a lot of his movies, he has one weak point that like moves on his body depending what time of day it is, and that's like his only vulnerability. And usually a lot of the protagonists' struggle and training would be all about getting that one weak point. So my connection I make to this is that we have some kind of neurological weak point where if you can, like, you know, because obviously we watch films, we watch entertainment, and it touches us in some psychological way. I am getting that James Incandenza somehow pinpointed through a mix of what's on the screen and the lighting.
Yeah.
That, from what I recall, it's something like
the pressure point of the pleasure part of the brain.
Yes, it is the five-finger exploding heart, Joel Van Dyne is your mom technique.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I will be back in a sec. My flatmate has locked themselves out and they are banging on the door, so I have to let them in. I'll be back in a few seconds.
Go for it. Okay. It is so delightful interviewing somebody with an accent. I feel so cultured sometimes. Just a little stuff like flatmate. I love it. I have not traveled enough. So I'm still, anytime I travel somewhere where, I was going to say where somebody has an accent, but realistically, where I am the dickhead with the accent, I'm always tickled by that. Except when I went to Oklahoma. Sorry, I was just talking to the listener about how fun it is just speaking with somebody who has a different accent.
Oh, yeah. I was going to... sorry to go off tails of the podcast. I was going to ask you, have you been to Boston? Is it...
I'm planning to go. I'm planning to go there for the first time in a few weeks.
Oh man, that's so cool! Because Boston's so like romanticized in my head. I know someone from Boston; they're lovely, and then Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, Twilight in Boston.
Matt, the only thing I know about Boston is great comedy, big hockey fans, and they're loud and beat the shit out of each other. That's what I hear. But I'm sure it's like back in the day. Oh, but anyway, so jump back a second. So from what I can garner about the entertainment is it's some film where like you're looking up at Joel Van Dyne, who is bending over, very maternal and just apologizing, like, I'm sorry, baby, I'm sorry. But because of the particular lighting and what's happening, I feel like what's happening is it's getting right into somebody's like earliest memories and basically turning them into a helpless like infant again.
Again, like when you describe like that, it sounds cool, but there is a part of me that is like the David Foster Wallace. Just imagine like mummy ASMR and think this is the thing that everyone would become obsessed with. This is the perfect piece of entertainment. Like it's just a very specifically Wallace-y thing that would sedate him, and he's kind of universalizing it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, I'm pulling this out of my ass because I just thought of it right now. But given the thoughts on entertainment, something here with the maternal aspect, there is a little bit of a notion of like maybe they stop moving or doing anything or breathing, because with the maternal aspect, it's like they're being taken care of right now. Like everything is being taken care of. It. There is their mommy looking down at them. And just like we look for entertainment to soothe us, we have just been so overwhelmingly soothed.
Yeah, it
Again,
works well on a metaphorical
right out of my
level.
ass. I don't know. So
no, that works really well on a metaphorical level. It's when you try to think about what the entertainment would literally be that it kind of is less satisfying. But yeah, if I take it as just kind of like a fairy tale, you put this tape on and it's like The Ring or something. Sure, it works.
Yeah, why not? The only other thing, we have a detail here where Maraith's father had a pacemaker, and Maraith was in charge of always making sure any place they went didn't have like microwave waves or whatever, or anything that would kill his dad. Maraith answered a video phone, a pulse of which malfunctioned the senior Maraith's pacemaker and killed him. And just to add to it, the call had been a telemarketer, so it wasn't even an important thing.
Yeah, just a depressing aside about Maraith. Do you like that? Did that flesh out Maraith for you, or
a little bit? I don't know. I mean, they talked a little bit how like his wife is in a coma and she was born without a skull, so like she's some way connected to. She's been affected by the pollution aspect, which gives him a little bit more of a motivation. But we haven't seen him do anything but sit around and talk to fucking Steeply about God knows what.
Yeah, he feels very much like an action movie character where you understand why they're doing what they're doing, and it makes sense, but they're not really like a person. They're just kind of like an angry man who's going to do the thing because my wife is in a coma, and one thing I do really like is like right at the end, it describes Steeply Cox's head sometimes, and it's both feminine and bird-like, and he's starting to speak with a more feminine inflection, and Maraith quote unquote commits all of these things to his memories. So this constant Maraith is constantly like looking at Steeply's body language and committing it to memory. Maybe that implies some sort of future betrayal. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember if Maraith is with Steeply or against Steeply, because the double agent thing just completely confused me. But yeah, maybe that implies a future kind of he's figuring Steeply out, or something's gonna happen there, hopefully.
Right. I'm really hoping there's some kind of payoff to them just watching Tucson burn, chatting about God knows what, which is what it seems to have been. But all right, we get into our last chunk of notes for the week, and I hated this section so much. Winter 1963, Sepulveda, California. I have my notes unknown narrator, but I'm pretty sure we're dealing with young James Incandenza and Incandenza Sr., who we last saw back in episode 6, talking to his son about making something of himself. The narrator in the first person is asked to help his father and mother in the bedroom. The father works at a commercial studio and is still wearing a wig and production makeup, a white wig. He portrays the Glad sandwich bag mascot, the Man from Glad. I meant to look this up. I don't know if this was ever an actual mascot. It's possible. The father.
I got very strong. Was it the Duff Man from Simpsons kind of vibe from this?
Yeah. Yeah, with the white wig and like the powder face, I'm picturing more of like a Ronald McDonald knockoff.
Yeah,
really cares about your leftovers. Yeah. The father gives him a glass of tomato juice to hold while he walked oddly on his mattress, looking for an exact spot that is causing an annoying squeak. He claims at night the squeak travels from this spot to the entire bed.
I want to point out this squeak because this is driving me crazy. So in the AFR bit, there's the whole squeak is foreshadowing the AFR showing up, and then in a footnote it describes that the squeak has become synonymous with like murder.
It's like a portent of doom. It's like it kind of like you never hear the bullet with your name on it. Like
and then here we have the squeak tormenting the father, but it's the bed, and obviously it's in the 60s. So I guess it's meant to kind of embed the whole section of this kind of like doom that something horrible is going to happen. Of course, nothing actually happens, but there's maybe it's meant to be you've associated a squeak with tension now. So
maybe. Well, we know that young Jim here gets involved with Avril later on, so something with the Quebecois rebels are gonna seep into his life. So we have that. Jim is now bigger than both his parents. His father wants him to help take the bed frame apart and look for the squeaky part to tighten it. Jim questions if it isn't just the mattress, but basically a new mattress is more expensive than a frame, so he'd rather rule out the frame first than doing anything that required such an expensive fix. Flips the king-size mattress onto Jim, which nearly takes him out. The thing is massive, yet still floppy and structurally unsounded, knocking over lamps here and there. So this chapter is almost entirely about a father and son slowly taking apart parts of a bed and leaning it in the hallway, with the always detailed DFW being sure to mention the exact degree of the angle the mattress is leaned against the wall.
Yeah, and again, like when I first read this, this drove me insane because I'm like, I hate this. I do not care about this bed. I just want to go read something interesting. So I think it did help, like rereading it, because I didn't have the same urgency. Like I thought the first time reading something, you just want to get to the next cool bit. But when you're rereading it for a purpose, it's like, okay, let's just slow down and take our time. So I do think there is some cool kind of stuff about like how domineering of a figure the father is and how the mother never speaks, and there is this like tension. You kind of get how tense his James' childhood was,
right?
But yeah, I do think it's presented in a very, very dull way.
Yeah, it's just I don't get it. I was liking this book a lot, but this really took me back to like the first 100 or so pages, with like just how many pages of this book, how many trees had to die, so we had to get. Like we could repopulate the fucking rainforest, like, but then we wouldn't know the exact diagnosis of the color. They spend a paragraph on the color of the rug and whether it's this kind of blue or that kind of blue, and it just
it really drove me crazy, especially reading it for like the podcast and just like I don't know what I'm gonna say about this. I don't know how to comment on what color the rug is.
Right. And this is why it bothers me that like David Foster Wallace has said like, oh, well, this book is about sincerity, where maybe it's just about the art that's come since, but like when I get this much pointless detail that's supposed to tell me something, I think of the opposite of sincerity. I think of like the dumb, ironic 3 a.m. Adult Swim cartoons. They're like, we're going to throw a bunch of bullshit at you and you're going to justify it to yourself that it's artful. As opposed to, and I know there's something to be said about it being in the first person, but again, the problem with me here is that with all the stuff we have seen about James and Candenza so far, the way they're describing him now does not sound like anything we've heard before. It sounds like they're describing him as like on the spectrum in some degree, like he's fascinated with angles. Like there's actually, we have here. At the very end of this, he dives onto his bed, knocking off a doorknob, which he watches roll. And then we literally get like the physics diagram in the book describing the radius and circumference in the pattern that the doorknob rolled in. And it's like, we haven't seen any hint of this in a character that we've been told about for almost 500 pages now.
Yeah, I guess. Because I keep thinking about, this is water and trying to think of it as like a key to understanding what Wallace is going for here. And I thought maybe it's a thing of like at the beginning of the novel, you have these very kind of simple ideas of the characters. And the more and more it goes on, the further back you go, the more you kind of get them. So at the beginning, James Lawrence and Cadenza is just like a wacky filmmaker, Willy Wonka man. By the end, you find out, he was reading some maths and science, and then he got into tennis, and then but I don't know how much I really asked this. I completely don't understand the annular fusion thing. Like, it's meant to be like an important theory, the annular systems thing. I don't know how that. Do you get that? Is that I don't know how that plays into the novel.
I got it. Wait, the what thing you're looking for?
So in footnote 208, it says that what we're reading here is an excerpt from James Orrin Condenser's book, chapter 16, The Awakening of My Interest in Annular Systems. And the book is called The Chill of Inspiration, Spontaneous Reminiscences of 17 Pioneers of DT Cycle Lithiumized Annular Fusion. So I think it's meant to be like the scientific discovery that I assume is important to like the world of the book, but I don't like get it. I don't know what it is yet.
I don't even remember this at all. I don't have any notes on it, so I have no idea.
So imagine like it's really weird. So this is like from an academic journal where this is the moment where he figured out this theory, and I thought conceptually, I thought it would be really cool. It'd be like maybe he had this like horrific, like traumatic experience with his dad, and the only way he could process it was through like mathematical equations or turning it into something really cold. But nothing really happens. It's just super tense. And maybe if you had a dad like this who was quite overbearing, I guess, and maybe this reads as a very like traumatic scene, but it didn't do much for me emotionally.
Yeah, this is only the second time we've seen James Sr., and like a lot of this, well, what we have here is the last little note I have is while grabbing for a supposed troublesome bolt, Senior starts having a coughing fit and collapses, spasming. Junior gives him space. Senior has collapsed straight down and broken the frame in two, spasming, face on the floor, ass in the air, spitting up either blood or tomato juice. Dust from his impact rising into the air. They mentioned the dust rising a lot.
Yeah.
Which I guess could be like repercussions rippling out in the world.
Maybe.
I don't know.
There's also like the mold underneath the bed, which I feel like mold is a big deal because of the How's origin story is eating the mold as a kid, right? So
right. But
it's similar to dust, right? The accumulation is bad.
Right, but they mention it so little that I keep forgetting mold. It's like, oh, mold's an important part of the story. Like, yeah, it's so important. They mention it once every 300 pages.
I think it's really vivid in my mind because that's from I had so much energy when I first started this book. So everything in the first 50 pages was like so important. So that mold bit, like, it was always stuck in my memory as a really cool scene.
Okay. So yeah, we don't know if he died here. Junior doesn't help him. He goes to the mother in the hall where she's having the trouble getting the vacuum cleaner past the stack box spring and mattress, taking up hall space. Junior then ran off to hide because he has a fear of the vacuum, like he's a small dog, which is said to be similar to his father's irritation with the squeak. So, and then the thing with the doorknob and the whole diagram, and it's just...
I wonder if the fear of the vacuum, which is a cleaning object, has anything to do with his marriage with Avril, who is like obsessive about cleaning, or...
True. It could come in there, especially, his father. I'm guessing that he maybe dies here, but his father, one way or another, is going through a very traumatic experience while dressed up as, the man from Glad, being sandwich bags and trash bags and all that, which is another sanitary type thing.
Yeah. I wonder if the scene would have worked better for me in like a film, like maybe the visual image of watching like someone dressed up really stupidly, this like short, stout guy shouting at his son and wife who are both taller than him, and then like collapsing and like vomiting either blood or tomato juice. Maybe that would be like really way more entertaining in a visual medium. But to read it's so little for me. And there is this leap of faith for this book you have to do, where whenever you read something that's terribly boring, you just have to believe that it matters, and at some point it will make sense and feel valuable.
And that's the only real hope to it. Like, I remember that first time we meet Erdity, and then we don't meet him for 400 pages, where it's like, it's not like any of his background has like come to fruition. It's just like, oh, there's that guy. So
yeah, I actually really like Erdity because I think Foster Wallace is basically Erdity, like addicted to weed, this kind of dicky academic guy. I think he's a weirdly revealing character. Maybe I don't know if Wallace like meant for that to be. There's also a weird thing where Erdity like has like unreciprocated feelings, which very much reminded me of the Wallace stuff, the drama.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's a lot to say on that, really.
All right. Well, that is the end of my notes for this week. So, trying to think. Do we have anything to wrap up? Any culmination here?
Yeah, I guess this really, like, this book has really made me question like how important my actual enjoyment is in reading something. Like, this is a book that constantly tells you to stop enjoying yourself and to be bored. So like when I'm reading it and I'm not having a good time, like, is that a valuable critique of the book, or am I just like a dumb pleasure hungry person who wants to read fun things all the time?
That is the main thing this book engages in people. Is it's like an initial, like, is this stupid or am I stupid? It really makes people doubt themselves.
I think Wallace's opinion of people is a bit too low, because I think, especially like now in 2020, I've seen so many of my friends who spend a lot of their time reading articles about like politics, you know, given how this year has been, or reading dry stuff and caring about dry stuff. And being more aggravated with the constant entertainment culture. And I feel like we aren't constantly inundating ourselves with fun. I feel like we do spend a good portion of our days feeling discomfort and thinking about, you know, is this election worth anything? How would the race riots stop? You know, should we defund police? Like I don't think we just sit around in pleasure boxes. So I wonder if this book constantly telling me that I am wrong, that at 8 p.m. of my day, a stressful day, I want to sit down and read something that will make me feel anything.
See,
I don't know, it's a bit harsh.
It is one of those tricky things, and this is one of those things where I've said that this book feels particularly 90s to me, in that it's in this is being written in an era where, in the zeitgeist, younger people are definitely thinking like, man, the world's just kind of bullshit. But now we look back in retrospect, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, are you not happy in your booming economy, getting jobs right out of college, not being crippled by debt? So it's kind of, people are taking this in a modern era where there are like much bigger things happening, which I think if this were written today, there would probably a bit more of I think it would be less about entertainment and more about information in general.
Yeah.
Because if you were to take it at the time, we're like, people are just entertaining themselves, and, you know, because boredom is the bad thing. Whereas the main takeaway I would have today is, we talked about it before with the cell phone, which I guess is a kind of an entertainment, but particularly with the election, like you mentioned, I have had to stop myself every now and again and be like, is this doing anything other than making me angry right now? Is there any new information in this what about this is really important to my life right now? Or am I just getting myself riled up for something I can't do anything about right now?
Yeah, and I wonder if that shift, I don't know what the air is like in America, but on the internet, it does seem like
the air in America is on fire. That is the air in America right now.
Well, that's how it feels like here. Like, everyone is, you can't really have a conversation now without politics coming up. And I wonder if this book was even written 10 years later, if Wallace would have maybe made it more information oriented. Which it would serve well as such like an encyclopedic novel where you're reading so much information that feels like aggravating or boring.
I think it would have been another reason I think it would have been information based. And again, this is not any long-standing philosophy I have referenced somewhere. I'm thinking it as we go. But particularly after 9/11, with the inundation of, like, we had 24-hour news before then, but all of a sudden every single news channel had some little crawlers on the bottom of the chyron, making sure, like...
I didn't know that. Did that start with 9/11? The crawling news? Wow, I didn't know that.
At least in the US, that's where it started, just because there was so much information coming in that they needed more than one output. But now it's the standard. And it's... actually, I don't know if CNN still does that. I can't remember the last time I watched that. But but when it becomes like a perspective thing, because I remember like after 9/11 happened, and I was young, I was like 14, 15. I remembered having the thought that, like, if I didn't have access to like a radio or television, none of this would really reach me. Like, it wouldn't have had any effect on me whatsoever. It's literally just pictures on a box telling me something bad happened and I should be afraid right now. And
Yeah.
not even in a conspiracy kind of way, just in a thinking about perspective and what really affects it. And, I was living in southern New Jersey, like an hour and a half away from everything, and it still didn't really affect me in any way.
Yeah, I've been thinking, that kind of empathy thing that the book is obsessed with. Like, I think it's even more intense now because I remember like when the French shootings were happening, or in London we had God, I'm blanking on the name of the tower. The Grenfell Towers, the Grenfell Tower fires.
Mhm.
I don't know if that was a big deal in America, but in London there was this huge Grenfell Towers that were on fire, and loads of people died, and it was horrifying.
Was it an arson or a political thing, or
It was like bad. It was like something in the housing blocks just like blew up. Like, it was complete happenstance. It was like an oven or something. And it pointed out how bad the government was doing of taking care of people. But when I found out about that, it was like really early in the morning, and my nan just like told me she'd seen it, and I couldn't feel anything because I it's so hard to turn on the empathy button of I have to feel the death of tens and several people right now.
Mhm.
It's almost impossible to feel that way. Same with like mass shootings happening in America constantly. Eventually it's so numbing to hear about them that it's really hard to get to that empathy point. So I wonder how Wallace would have felt about, in my opinion, it becoming even harder to feel empathetic like today,
Mhm.
because we're so inundated with information.
Yeah, it's well, I know you guys have stuff going on over there with Brexit and all that stuff, but here it's really been building up over the last 15 years, but it feels like there's a kind of unofficial balkanization of the United States, where it's just like, if you're in this region, you will like, the people in this region are so different than the people that you hear that like it's hard to feel anything for them, because it is also just, I don't know, man. I don't care for my country very much right now. My country or my countrymen.
Yeah,
So.
I'm not feeling great about Great Britannia either. A wonderful colonial nation, but
What is the latest on Brexit right now? Like, what's happening with it? It seems like they've been trying to kick the can down the road.
I'm honestly not even sure. Like, I don't know. Like, we don't really get inundated with Brexit news anymore because after COVID hit, like,
True.
no one talks about Brexit anymore. Like, in a very colloquial way. Like, I'm sure like people working in the government think about it a lot, but like on someone on the ground level, it's very low on the discussion point.
Yeah.
It's like, I think right now the biggest tensions in London are just similar to America, like about like the eviction rates going so high, and the COVID being handled so poorly.
Yeah, we've got the federal government has extended the moratorium on evictions, but it's still like it's going to be a nightmare when it comes out. Nobody's sure what's happening. As far as the COVID stuff, like people are we're starting to get a little scared over here because like we all got a little loosey goosey over the summer, but the weather's already getting cooler, so it's like people are very much grappling with like, are we going to have to shut down again?
Yeah.
And again, this is all with, and also in the background, our president might cancel an election and throw out the Constitution.
Yeah, you had the postal service fiasco happening.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. It's awful.
Oh no! It's
very bad.
It's terrifying and hilarious. Yes, that our president is making news saying he didn't want to go to an American cemetery in France because it's full of losers. Yeah. Whew. Okay. Well, we could keep going all day about very scary shit in the world, but Yeah, this has been a good episode. You had a lot of good insights, and I like having somebody more the target audience. Like as we were talking, like being extremely young. Well, younger than me at least. But like again, you're in the demographic where I feel like everybody really gets into this book. I feel that we didn't get into any of the racial aspect at all, other than Gately.
Yeah, I don't think it's in the same way that I do think it's aimed at like white dudes, because in the same way that like women on the episode on your episodes read it, and it's so glaringly obvious that like a
Mhm.
guy is writing this, and like it's so male gazy. I do get the same feeling as someone who like isn't white, because I can't really think of a single well-written like non-white character in the book. They are all a bit of stereotypes or insensitively written. Where he's not. I don't think Foster Wallace is racist. I just think he has that very like Gen X liberal attitude about race. Like he fundamentally sees other races as like so different and almost like fascinatingly different. Like there's an exotic quality to them, but there's not really the sensitivity or just like, hey, these are just people. There's a bit coming up with Kennedy in like the next episode. There's like a bit with Kennedy and a black dude, and I thought it was funny at first. That then it got kind of weird and racial, and yeah, he's got this sort of discomfort about it. He can't just write like an Asian character or a black character. They have to be really Asian or really black. Like it's he has to make it really clear. Like the episode you did with I can't remember who it was, but the medical attaché is like half white. And lots of half white people are maybe basically passing. Like it's already the Foster Wallace makes like a huge deal that he's half Asian. Like so yeah, I do get like kind of liberal Gen X white guy vibes.
See, I feel like that was more like the attitude towards that kind of thing in the 90s, where it was more important to like just make sure they were in there than to actually look into them at all. I mean,
yeah. And that's one thing I've been thinking about. Like, so he uses the N-word in this book a lot. And if I have, and I feel like right now, like transphobia is such a touchy issue because we're at a point where there's lots of trans visibility, but the world collectively hasn't like reached that point of not being collectively not trans. Like we're only just now hitting where celebrities, PR teams are thinking about pronouns and things like that, making sure that people don't get cancelled. And I have trans friends, so if I wrote a book where I just kept using transphobic slurs and then like gave it to my trans friends to read, like I don't know, would they come back like, what are you trying to say? Like, why are you using words that are very harmful to us, like constantly? Like, I imagine, like, did Foster Wallace like give this to his black friends, and they get to the Wardine B. Cry chapter? Did any of them like talk to him like, "Hey, man, what the hell? Like, what are you trying to do with this?" Or was it just, when you have to actually deal with reckoning with how those people will deal with your work, I feel like you become way more sensitive about it.
I feel like you could probably write a very successful short story just called David Foster Wallace's One Black Friend. Just responding to reading this, like, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, well, no, it's because he was raised wrong. Like, but okay. But I'm not the person who should write that. So, all right. Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you very much for doing this. This has been a good episode. I like that.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to continuing the journey, listening to the podcast and reading the book, and hopefully it, it has its moments, but hopefully it really gets better. Hopefully we hit a point where we can read like a solid 100 pages and it's like just good,
Yeah. So what I haven't hit yet, and I get with every other book, is because I only read up until like what I need for the next week's episode. At no point have I gone like, man, I really want to read more of this right now. It's always just been the obligation for the podcast, but we'll get there maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Cool. So tell us again your podcast and where we can find you on social media.
Awesome. So our podcast is the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast. In at social media, you can find us at Minority Arts Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. I'm Josh Kaluba. You can search on Twitter, follow me, but yeah, I don't really invest much in my private Twitter page, so I don't give a shit. But yeah, check out the pod if you want. We recently did an episode on, I don't know if you're into like minimal synth, like industrial, but we recently did an episode of Throbbing Crystal. That was really fun. I think we've got one on suicide coming out. So yeah, check it out. It's a good time.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I will check that out. So thank you, Josh Kaluba. I will now stop recording, but you and I can chat for a minute.